Hi, this is Fred Green of Golf Smarter with the first of two episodes where Tony Manzoni made his 10th appearance on Golf Smarter, number 594, in May of 2017. It had been 2.5 years since we'd last spoken to Tony, and clearly we had a lot to discuss, creating an episode longer than most. Now, after this week, there are 2 more episodes with Tony. I know I said that last week, but I decided to bring back Tony's very last appearance back when he announced his new golf school with 2 of his closest friends, but it was just before his cancer made it tough to carry that through. Tony's book, The Lost Fundamental, is available on Amazon, and his DVD, which we converted to a private link online, is also available when you write to me. For the most comprehensive information ever collected on Tony, please go to golfsmarter.com/Tony. And while you're there, check out how to make a tax-deductible donation to our Tony Manzoni Memorial Golf Smarter Fund to benefit the first tee of Coachella Valley, where Tony lived and taught for decades. If you'd like to access that video, please write to me directly, golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com, or click on the Hey Fred button when you visit golfsmarter.com. Take your golf game to the next level, one club at a time, with Tony Manzoni.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome back to the Golf Smarter podcast, Tony.
How are you, Fred?
I am doing well and so glad to hear from you again. It's been quite a while. But let me give the audience just a taste of how many times you've been on this podcast. The first time back in 2010 we were introduced, and since then you've been on 12 different episodes, 251. And take notes of this, folks, because after you hear this conversation with Tony, you're going to want to go back and listen to other things he has to say, because I've had Golf Smarter listeners have told me that they've traveled cross-country to go get lessons with Tony, right? You've had people come in from New Jersey or Connecticut or something, Tony?
Yeah, the doctor come in from New York. He runs one of the largest hospitals there, and he came in for a 2-day golf instruction period. And, just first of all, I was flabbergasted, number one, and, it was a big compliment. And he's turned out to be just a wonderful friend on top of it.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. I have a feeling I know who you're talking about. So 251, 254, 291, and 328, 408 and 409, 438 and 439, 456 and 457. Now, 457 back in 2014. Really? You haven't been on that long? My favorite, it's one of my favorite titles of all time. And the question I posed to you, Tony, if Tiger Woods called you for help, what would you say? I loved that. That was a great episode. So 2014 was the last time you're on? That doesn't make sense. Anyway, it's great to have you back on the show. Thank you so much.
I'm very pleased, Fred, and it's been a long time. But as we get older, time goes by a little bit faster. I mean, in a blink of an eye, I'm an old man. So
I'm not even going to ask this time how old you are, because I think I asked you before, which was rude, and I'm not going to do it again. But you've outlived a lot of your friends. Let's just say that.
Let's just say my speedometer's turned over a few times.
Yeah, and you've outlived a lot of friends and a lot of famous people that you hung out with down in the desert. Isn't it true?
That's true. Starting out with the number one guy, Frank Sinatra, his death was, it was a catastrophe for all his fans, including myself.
Yeah, I bet. But didn't you tell me once that hanging out with Sinatra and the Rat Pack down in those days, down in the desert, kind of had a negative impact on your golf career, didn't it? Your professional touring golf career.
Well, I was just when the lady that ran his compound, her name was Vine, and I was working at Mission Hills Country Club as head professional. Once I got invited, it seemed like I got invited just about every night because he was retired at that time, and I was opening up that pro shop close to 5:30 every morning, and I was leaving the Sinatra compound after 2:00 in the morning every evening. So, yes, everything suffered a bit, but I couldn't pass that opportunity.
No,
it was an incredible thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are golfers who have played on the tour who said, yes, I played on the tour and I won once, but none of them get to say, but I got to hang out with Sinatra every night for way too long.
Yeah, it was amazing. It still feels like a Fellini film to me when I think back on the people I met and the unbelievable dinners and conversation. It was just incredible.
That's amazing. Also, I've been promoting this podcast that I've been putting out recently as a show that I did in 1987, but it's just so much fun that I had to bring it back. This show, Radio Baseball Cards, that's hosted by the late Don Drysdale. You knew Drysdale as well, right?
I did. I met him on a couple of occasions, and I also knew his wife, who's involved in a lot of golf activities. And, she was an Olympic champion and an unbelievable gal. But Don was a unique individual and very nice, obviously one of the great pitchers of all time. And I have a baseball signed by him that I cherish.
Unbelievable. All right, well, let's talk about golf now. Enough history on where you've been and the marks that you've left. I had this idea, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about taking your game to the next level, one club at a time, right? Because there are some clubs, for some people, just don't work, right? Right?
I think golf clubs, as we all know that play and suffer through this challenge, some golf clubs don't like you. I mean, I've had wedges that I wanted to tie to my car and drive around the block, pay them back for all the skull shots that I hit with them. So, yeah.
I've often said that I had a 5-iron that I was allergic to. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, all kidding aside, that's why getting fitted is so important, because then you eliminate the blame factor.
I recently was fitted for a new set of clubs, and I really love these clubs, but there seems to be one club that is not cooperating. I'm hitting everything where I'm pointing. I'm my target. It goes to where I'm, focused on, except this one club just takes this huge right turn every time. Is that possibly because there's one club that was not correctly made in that set? I mean, what can I do about that?
Sure. Loft and lie changes, especially if they're not cast clubs, and even cast clubs you can move them a little bit. So yeah, that happens a lot. Or it's because you fear hitting the shot with that club, which compounds the problem. And
sure.
Probably in most cases that's it. It's so difficult to stay in that and have that feeling that you're going to hit a good shot prior to hitting it. And I think that's the challenge for everyone at every level.
Yeah. I haven't had them long enough to fear the club, and it's a club that in previous sets I've been, really excited about. Oh, good, I've got a 6-iron shot that I want to make here. And now this 6-iron is baffling me. I'm just wondering if maybe I should take it back to the club fitter and say, can we test to see if this is within its correct specs? Is that?
Oh, sure. They can do that quite easily. They can check the loft and lie on the club, and they can also check the shaft, if it's performing properly, and they have your whole set to go by, so they can just make sure that it is matched. And this does happen. There's no question about it. But I'm glad to hear that you had your clubs fitted, and that's really an important thing. When you think of the top professionals have it done, we meager players must have it done. And that's the problem. Most people will go and buy a club right off the rack, and then they're chagrined when it doesn't work for them. And a lot of times it's just because the club doesn't fit.
Right. Well, what about if they go into the shop and said, hey, you know what? I hit my friend's driver and I crushed it. I want to buy that driver.
Yeah, it's hard to replicate. I mean, I have a good friend that is he's noted for those kinds of things, and he'll go and he'll try a demo club, but he'll want to buy that demo club. And a lot of times they say, "But we can't sell you this one, but we'll get one like it." But he refuses to do that because psychologically, if he gets another club that has the same name and is supposed to be the same thing, and he hits a bad shot with it, he's not going to say, well, that shot was because I swung poorly or did something. He's going to say, nah, this isn't the same club. So we're right back to that psychological thing that we all fight.
Yeah, actually about 10 years or so ago, I remember having a conversation on the show with Kenny Nicholson when we were working with Edwin Watts Golf. And he said, if you have an opportunity to swing a friend's club and you like it, try to buy that club off your friend because you're never going to find that exact right club in a store.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there was no question I was going to get fitted. We've been advocating being fitted, since the very beginning. We've talked to guys like Tom Wishon, one of the great custom club makers in the world, and getting fitted is so important. But I always, when I recommend to people to get fitted, they're like, but I'm going to wait till I get more consistent. I want to wait until I feel more What do you tell people who have, who don't feel like it's necessary yet? They're going to get to some place where they're going to do that.
I can tell you that's a fallacy. To say that I'm going to wait till I'm going to be more consistent, you better have a lifespan of about 200 because the only guy I know that got to that point was Ben Hogan. Everybody else mishits the ball, and that's just the nature of the sport, really. Well, it isn't even a sport; it's a challenge. That's the nature of it. I mean, think about it. There's a little ball sitting there, not a very big target, and we're swinging a golf club. It's in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, depending on your speed and youth, at that little creature down there, and we're told to hit through it. But it's really hard to hit through it without trying to hit it, and that's it's a constant challenge. And to say I'm going to wait till I get consistent is just you want to start laughing, but a lot of people feel. I've heard that said before, and I say you're going to wait a long time, pal. The whole thing about getting fitted is the clubs feel good. You get a sense of the weight feels right. I feel like I could swing this club. And it gives you confidence. I mean, it really does. And, of course, if they're all somewhat the same, they can't be exactly the same, but if they're somewhat the same, especially the shaft, you got a much better chance to hit. Your miss hits can get much better.
Right. So somebody recently said to me, I want to be more consistent first. And I said, well, how do you score? What do you generally shoot? He goes, well, I pretty much shoot in the upper 80s, low 90s. Consistently. I said, well, then you are consistent. What's the problem? Well, I have mishits during the game. I said, well, everybody has mishits, but are you working on the things that you're not good at when you're practicing? Oh, I never practice. I don't have time to practice. Well, then you're never going to get consistent if you don't practice. And, you want to talk about getting consistent or you want to talk about getting better, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And really we learn more about our game when we mishit the ball than when we really hit it pure. Generally when you drive it down the middle and you just clocked it, you're just you look and you get so excited, but you don't get a lot of feedback because you're kind of in that zone where you're not really thinking about how to do it. When you hit a poor shot, and this is all the golf teams I've had through all the years with these young guys, I tell them, listen, don't let, when you hit a poor shot, your first thought is anger. What you should do is watch that ball and blueprint it in your mind of what's the spin on it. Is it spinning right, left, whatever, or did you hit it thin or did you hit it fat? And then there's a remedy for those things. But if you kind of black out and just get mad, that's the time when you learn. And that's why touring pros are so darn good, because they they know when they hit a ball and they block it, they know what they've done, and they can make a quick cure.
Mm-hmm.
But they're really conscious of what happened. They don't just bluster and slam the club on the ground and so forth.
My favorite is when somebody says, they're having a problem. They go, "Oh, well, I know what I did wrong." It's really, how do you know that? Have you ever had a lesson? Have you ever had anyone tell you what your issue is? No, but I just know I've watched a lot of TV, so yeah, I know what I'm doing wrong. Oh, okay. We'll let it go at that. The other thing about being fitted for clubs and having clubs in your hands that you feel have been not custom made but customized for you is your level of confidence when you're playing. I know that I've only been playing with these clubs now for just under 2 months, and my last round, I walked out there. I had so much confidence when I walked off the range that I was able to carry through the round, that I had one double bogey in the round, and I just, I shot an 80, and I was just ecstatic, but it felt great the entire time. So the amount of confidence.
Sure, that's a wonderful feel, because the game is a field game. And it's wonderful when you have something in your hands that feels right. And there's lots of times where you'll have a golf club that doesn't feel right. And I promise you, don't beat yourself over the head trying to make it feel good. Get another one. I told you about the 3-wood I had for so long, and it just plagued me. And instead of replacing it like I should have immediately, I fought the darn thing, and it just wasn't for me. And so I suffered with a lot of bad shots, whether it was psychological or the club was really too heavy or whatever. That's the best advice I can have to anybody. If you have a putter or whatever that you feel like you can't putt with, get another one. I mean, that's okay. I mean, even the touring pros do that.
Yeah, but the touring pros seem to change their grip on their putter a lot too.
Well, that's probably, when you're putting for $1 million, it's a little different than when you're putting for $2. So what happens is that we start getting too involved in the action, and we acquire a little bit of a flitch, like they call it the yip, where you're too involved with impact, especially with the putter, where you're putting the ball is just a matter of swinging the putter back and forth in a rhythm, but they've made so much about it. So with all these claw grips and this grip and that grip, and the big grips now are very popular because the hands are taken out of it a bit. But I think the big grips take away the feel of the head, and that was very important. If you look at the putters of the past and some of the great guys that putted, they had very small grips because they wanted to feel the weight of the club head. So, it's all relative. But right now, that seems to be the thing. You see the grips on most of the putters are pretty large. Yeah.
Yeah, the thick grips. I love having the thick grip on my putter just because it keeps me from squeezing too tightly. It allows me to loosen my hands.
Yeah, that's very true. You can use more of a shoulder arm stroke opposed to more of a popping or hand stroke. You look at some of the great putters where they hinge the putter back and through, like Billy Casper and people like that. And today's world, you got Seneca who kind of pop putts everything. But when I teach, I have a lot of juniors I teach that have done very well, and I don't emphasize a lot of technique in putting. I really want them to have a natural feel and to train them, if anything, on distance control. Their eyes will eventually get used to what square is. But when you start talking about putting and how to do it too much, I think you get people too conscious of the stroke during putting the ball. And what are we doing when we're putting? We're rolling the ball on the surface. And, if you just keep it simple like that, you take these little kids, you give them a putter and a ball, and you see them putt terrific because their mind isn't clogged up with all this technique. I think that's been so overdone, and there's so many things you can buy where you take the putter straight back, and good Lord, the greatest putters in the world didn't take it straight back. Some of them cut the putt, some of them hooked the putt. And George Lowe, Maxwell. I've seen so many guys cut putts, but that was their natural way of doing it, and they didn't question it. It's like Jim Furyk with his golf swing. If you wanted to break that down and say, well, that's not on plane. Well, it is on plane when he hits the ball. So, as I teach, and I've been teaching a long time, at every level, from touring professional to 25 handicappers, the less you say, the better. The more they can see it and feel it based on words you give them, the better. The more technical you get, most people can't handle that, and I think most people do their best when they see it more than when they're told how it's supposed to happen. I know as a kid that I caddied, I learned to play golf watching the people hit the ball that I caddied for. I know there's lots to be said about that.
What did you mean when you said cut putting?
Well, there's I'm trying to think of the guy, but he was a great putter on tour, and he literally cut across the ball. He swung from out to in, so he put side spin on it that would literally make the ball. The spin would be going from left to right. We've heard many times you get a range ball and get the stripe straight so that when you putt it, the stripe doesn't wobble. That's an effective tool to practice. But who's the, I'm trying to think of the guy that was the greatest putter of all time, where he hooded the putter going back and then hit from in to out like you're hooking a ball, and he won 1 million tournaments because he was such a great putter. My point here is this: you got to do it the way it feels. And once you get away from the natural feel of your putting stroke, and now you start trying to manufacture it, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. All this stuff about, well, don't let your wrist hinge, or it has to be a flat wrist through impact. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. In fact, a lot of times when you're trying to push that thing through with the wrist staying flat, you block hit it all the time. I mean, there's been putters, Bobby Jones, Arnold Palmer, there's been all kinds of ways of doing it. And you got to find the thing that feels comfortable to you, whether it's grip, stance, alignment, what feels comfortable to you, and then just roll the ball on the surface. Just get to where you can roll the ball and get away from all this other stuff. And first of all, you won't get the yips doing that. But boy, when you start overthinking putting, and look at Ben Hogan, that's what he did. And it's a shame to see it. I have young boys that I train, and they start saying, "Coach, I can't putt," which is just ridiculous. I said, "You mean you can't roll a ball on a flat surface?" And they look at me like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, well,
"Yeah, I can, but not into a hole."
Yeah. So, but it's honestly, I think the less you emphasize putting, the better you'll putt. The more you talk about it and think about it, I think it puts a block. I think that's where all that stuff comes from. I think with Hogan, he hit it so close in his later years, and he felt like he should be rewarded for that. Like a dog when he's a good boy, he goes outside and does his business. And when he comes in, he wants a cookie. But in golf, there is no cookie. You still got to get the ball in the hole, whether it's a 5-foot putt or a 50-foot putt. And I think that's what happened with Hogan, because he made statements that said, putting shouldn't be so important. You should get points just for getting it close to the hole. Well, that was his frustration coming out, because he did hit it so close. And unfortunately, he did have the yips. He couldn't pull a putter back on a short putt.
Wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I watched him at the Olympic Club. The only time I had the pleasure of seeing him play golf, and at the Olympic Club, he played in I think it was the Open. And, I mean, he hit every fairway, every green, and I don't think he had more than a 12-foot putt all day. And the only putts he made were kick-ins. But when he got that 4 or 5 footer, he couldn't. His pant leg would be shaking. He couldn't pull the putter back.
Wow!
Now you think about that. This is a guy that could go in a motel and hit a 2-iron right down the hallway and not hit either side of the wall. I mean, that's what he could do. I mean, that's a genius. So now you walk up to him and say, "Ben, you mean to tell me that you can't take this putter back and roll the ball on the green?" well, what are you thinking about? See, but of course, you couldn't do that. But I mean, that's the silliness of putting, and gosh, look at all the apparatuses you can buy to putt better.
I've never heard anybody describe using the analogy, if it is an analogy or not true, about hitting a 2-iron down a hallway in a hotel room and not hitting the walls. Is that actually a story that happened, or is that just?
From what you hear all kinds of stories about him, just like you do Mo Norman. But he actually had a bet that he could do it, and he did. He just ripped it right off the carpet.
That is phenomenal.
The guy could not only control the flight of the ball, but the trajectory of the ball. It was magical. Believe me when I tell you, it was magical. Watching him play that Olympic Club is really hard course, as you know. And then they had it set up for the Open, and he made it look like Toyland. It was he just went around that golf course and just diced it. And in fact, I was a very low handicap player. I was in the plus area, and when I saw him play, I realized I really don't know how to play golf. And because it was watching a master, do a painting or something. I felt. I was happy to see it, but I was very insecure when I got in my car. I can say that.
That's really interesting and painful. Well, I think that take this idea of taking your game to the next level, one club at a time, which I suggested, but I do want to cover it. I think starting at the putter is a great place to start with that. So I'm going to toss out these club names and give me a thought or a tip on what you can do to take your game to the next level with that specific club. And let's start with the putter.
Again, with the putter, what I teach people to hold the putter comfortably and any way they really want to hold it within reason. And I work on distance control, whether it's a 5-foot putt or a 20-foot putt or a 50-foot putt. I don't tell them to get it into a circle around the green. I tell them to try to roll it into the hole on all putts, because I think that's a natural feeling where you're saying put it in a 3-foot circle. Now you bring it into another situation that you have to deal with. So in putting, I'm teaching them to roll the ball. In fact, one of the great pros said, if I were going to teach putting today, and this is the fellow that helped Jack Nicklaus putt, he said I would put somebody on a green with no holes, and I would teach them to roll the ball distances, teach them how to roll the ball and not hit it and skid it, but roll it. And I believe that quite a bit.
So I actually want to go to a different club that I saw a video tip that you did that I've used ever since, and I'm going to go to the 8-iron for using it around the fringe to get the ball onto the green. Using your 8-iron as a putter.
Yeah, Paul Runyon was the first guy that really did this, where he would take an 8-iron or a 7-iron or a 5-iron, whatever, depending on the distance you had to cover, and he would take the heel of the club off the ground so that he could get the shaft in the same alignment as your putter, and he put his hands on it on the length. So in some cases, if you had a 5-iron, he'd slide his hands down near the metal, but so that he was replicating standing up with his putter. And then he used a putting type stroke. No, not exactly. The club had to come up a little bit, but he used more of a one-lever stroke opposed to cocking the wrist or doing anything like that. And the idea is to find out how far on the green you had to land the ball and then let it release to the hole. So if you were up close, you'd be hitting an 8-iron or 9-iron or even maybe a pitching wedge. You wouldn't use this with a sand wedge. It's too much loft. But that's a much simpler way to chip. Most people will pull out their sand wedge or pitching wedge and use it all around the green when they're chipping. I'm not talking about pitching the ball. I'm talking about chipping it. And that's a much more difficult shot, much more difficult.
Yeah, it is. when I was telling you that this 80 that I shot the other day, I had 6 one putts on the front 9. I was 1 over par after 9. I only had 1 birdie, but so that means I was coming up short on my approach shots, but I was getting it close to the hole. And a lot of times I've been using that 8-iron chip. And once you learn to control that, once you feel comfortable with it, it's a great shot to have in your bag.
Oh yeah, because when you're chipping, you're not trying to impart backspin. You want the ball to release the hole, and the quicker you can get it on the green, the better. When you have a more lofted club, you have to lift the club a bit and hit down on the ball a bit, and that brings it into a lot of areas of getting tight with the hands and either sculling it or hitting way behind it. They call it shelly dip. Both of them are hideous, especially the skull. Like the guy said one time, "How far do you hit the ball?" He says, "Well, I hit my sand wedge about 150 yards." He says, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, from a greenside bunker."
Yeah.
So, that happens. That happens with these clubs that are constructed that way. You have to be a little bit more accurate in your stroke. Where with a putting stroke, even if you hit it a little thin, it doesn't really affect anything. The ball will roll just about the same as you did if you hit it pure.
I've noticed a lot of people will take a lob wedge or a high lofted club if they're 5, 10, 15 yards off the green. Well, let's just keep it at 10 yards off the green and in. But they're trying to get the ball to land softly, and then trickle up. But isn't the goal, shouldn't you try to get the ball onto the flat surface as soon as possible and let it release, let it roll as long as it can? Or do you want to try to drop it in
Absolutely.
there?
No, absolutely. When you're doing those kinds of things, you got grain to deal with. Sometimes you have the green goes up, or you'll have a second lever. Your target is way too small when you do those kinds of things, and sometimes you impart backspin on it where you pinch it a little bit and you get too much backspin. So you want to get all that out of there. You want to just get that ball on the green and let it release to the hole. It's just an easier shot. I mean, that's the bottom line, because the nerves do get in, especially if you got that ball on a little bit of tight grass. It's much better to take an 8 or 9 iron or 7 iron and just putt chip it. It's so much simpler.
Right. Is there a rule of thumb to how much a ball will release depending on which club that you use? Like if you're using the 8 iron versus a pitching wedge and you're chipping it up on the green?
Sure. I mean, let's just say that let's say we're going to land the ball a yard or two onto the green. If you land the ball a yard or two on the green with a 7 iron, the ball is going to release a lot farther than it does a 9 iron, unless you're hitting it harder. But if you're consistent in your stroke, the less loft you have, the more it's going to release. So you don't. I mean, I don't just use the 8 iron when I chip, because if the pin's way back and I'm in the front of the green, I'll take a 5 iron and do the same thing, because I know that my target is still going to be where I want the ball to land. Is going to be the same as if it was an 8 iron or a 9 iron, but the ball's going to release farther because I have less loft. So
it's really about where you want the ball to land, and then you decide which club to use from there.
Exactly.
And how do you pick the area of where you want it to land? What are you looking for?
For me, it's, unless the pin is really, the cup is real close. For me, it's about a couple of yards on the green, 4 or 5 feet, and then let it release. But again, my target might get a little closer to me if it's a short chip. But again, my landing target is always close to me, opposed to if I had a sand wedge or a lob wedge in my hand.
All right, now let's go back to our wedges, back to this one club at a time. Let's go, I guess, with your lob wedge. If I carry a 60 degree, a 57 degree, and then a 52, and a pitching wedge, about a 48. So I like to carry a bunch of wedges with me as opposed to carrying a lot of hybrids or fairway woods. So the lob wedge, what can you do? What will that help you do to get your game to the next level? And should you be practicing with a high lofted club like that?
Well, the lob wedge is strictly for hitting the ball high and soft. So it's a shot where you want to, you're above the green, below the green, and you need to throw it up there, but you don't want it to release. That's what the lob wedge is for. Because of the loft, you can go at it with a little bit of speed, and the ball will just go higher. And that's a shot you should practice a lot because there are times you need it. But I know so many people that overdo it when they have a much simpler shot where it doesn't call for that kind of shot, but they still do it. In fact, Phil Mickelson is one of the guys that does that, but he's like a wizard. But you can't.
Let's not compare ourselves to what Phil Mickelson can do
but you can't replicate. Even guys on tour can't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you're in and around the green, which is the scoring area, whether you're pitching the ball on, you want to do it the simplest way, the way that even if you miss hit it, it doesn't become a catastrophe. When you start lifting that club up and bringing it down on the ball in a more steeper angle, it brings in the miss hit is going to be, it could be horrendous, where you line drive it over the green into a lake or something like that. Where when you're using a more level to the ground stroke, if you hit a little bit thin or a little bit fat, you don't lose. It doesn't hurt you, and that's what when I play, and even when I played well, after being around Paul Ryan and listening to him, my game improved dramatically. Even when I would miss a lot of greens, I could get it up and down a lot easier than I had in the past because I was one of these guys that wore out my sand wedge.
Yeah, well, turning, I think the best thing I ever heard about that was trying to turn 3 shots into 2.
Sure. That's the whole name of the game. And everybody misses greens. Everyone does. As I tell my boys, if you hit 10 balls, seven of them better be with the short clubs, the scoring clubs, because the driver, the driver it's built for one thing, to get the ball in play with a fairly good distance, but it's not a long drive club as it's been, television. That's all they talk about is, he hit that 400 yards and 350 and whatever. They don't tell you that the ground is hard as a highway. Number one, that's how they set it up. So you get 400 yards of roll. They don't tell you any of that stuff, but it's too much emphasis on that and not enough emphasis on, distance control, taking the right club. Ken Ventura used to tell me, when you got a 7-iron to the green, take a 6-iron out and hit it. You're going to be surprised because if you kept a chart of every time you hit a ball to the green, were you short or long, 90% of the time you're short.
You're short.
So, yeah, absolutely. So it was and it was something I followed, and it improved my game. I got the ball a lot closer to the hole by doing that, and he got that from Hogan. So,
yeah, club up.
Like
just club up on your approach shots, no question. When I'm talking about the 3 shots to 2, if you're the point is you want to chip up to the green and get it close enough where you can one putt. Where I play with people, if you're doing a pick shot from 30 yards or 20 yards in, if you get it on the green, they're like, hey, great shot. It's like, I left myself a 35-foot putt. That's not a great shot. I mean, yeah, I'm on the green, but big deal. I mean, the point was I wanted to get within 5 feet of the hole.
Well, I'll give you a good example of that. I've got a lot of young boys that can hit it a long ways, okay? And they'll get on a par 5 and they can reach it with a 3-wood in some cases. I mean a par 5 that's like 550 or 575. And I tell them, look, the trajectory of that ball coming in is either if you mishit it, you're gonna bury it in the lip of the green side bunkers, or if it hits the green, it's going to the back of the green or maybe even over. So you're always going to be looking at a 40 or 50 foot putt that you've got to get down in 2. And a lot of times you 3-putt it, and now you say, God, I hit the green in 2 and I've made a 5. Okay, it's much simpler if you can hit something up there in your scoring range, like 60, 70 yards. Now you can take your sand wedge and throw it up there, and you can get it close, and you're going to make a lot of birdies that way. But again, you hear the announcers talk about these guys. Well, Bob, he's got a 7-iron. It's 225 yards, and so these kids, that's what they're trying to do. It's insane. I think that the broadcasters of golf, some of them, not all of them, but some of them have hurt the game so much because, first of all, we don't get the ball that the pros play with. Believe me when I tell you that. That ball is custom made to their swing. So they got a hot ball. And that's why a guy like the guy that won the Masters, he's got an 8-iron out and he's hitting it close to 200 yards. Come on.
Sergio Garcia.
Sergio. Come on. That's not possible unless that club is jacked up or the ball is jacked up.
Interesting.
And that's the reality of it. I mean, these guys aren't any stronger than Ben Hogan or guys like that. But the ball and the club they're using is they're juiced up.
Mm-hmm.
No question about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they seem to be spending a whole lot more time talking about distance and how they boom it and not the wizardry of the short game. And I think that these, since the Tiger effect has come in and courses have gotten longer and longer and longer, they're playing into, by making the courses longer, you're just playing into their hands. Make it tougher on the short game and let's see what they can do with it.
Sure. I mean, when they play some of these real tough courses in the New York area and the Midwest, they don't tear them up. You don't see 20 under par or any of that kind of stuff. But they set the golf courses are set up for scoring. They get in there and they cross-cut those fairways. The fairways are faster than some of the greens that the guys in the 30s and 40s and 50s played on. And they just make the golf course fast. Mm-hmm. And it's great for television because there's a zillion birdies and so forth. But what they've done is they've taken the shot making out of the game. Even the ball, it's hard to move the ball left to right or right to left now, purposely, I should say. Mm. And so, it's a shame. I think it's a shame in a way because they've made a lot of great golf courses that were tremendous courses to play. And they've kind of made them obsolete because of what they've done with the equipment.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing that kind of makes me crazy is they're customized these courses for a tournament that may happen once a year at best or once every 5 or 6 years. And so that means they're customizing the course for 0.0001 of the amount of golfers that are going to play that course. But it gets TV exposure.
Oh, that's one of the things that irritates me more. I have a lot of clients that belong to very posh golf courses, and these courses are everyone's looking to get more members. So what do? Well, we've got to get a younger group, and the membership's $300,000 or $400,000. There's not too many young people that have that kind of money to throw around, but that's what they get in their head. So now they put a set of what they call the championship tees, and they're so far back on the hole. The average guy out there is in the late 60s and early 70s, and they can't hit it out of their shadow. So what are they doing? Instead of setting up tees that for your membership, if you got a lot of guys that are 70, your up tees and especially the ladies' tees should correspond to the distance that those people hit the ball, so that they're in the game. Many years ago, I did the mixed team championship. And when we were figuring this thing out, we looked at the tour averages of ladies and men, and the ladies needed a 75-yard advantage off the tee because we had to take in consideration the second shot, not just the first shot.
Of course.
So if the average guy hit a drive an 8-iron, we wanted the same for the gals. You can't get it exact, but we want it to be close. You go on golf courses today, and you'll see the men's tees, and you see the ladies' tees maybe 10, 15 yards, maybe 20 yards forward. That's just insane. Now you got these gals out there. They're beating driver 3-wood with no chance of getting there, and they're hitting 5-iron on the third shot on a par 4. That takes the fun out of the game, and it's an unfair challenge. It's an unfair challenge.
Well, I think that was the whole point of play it forward. right?
Exactly. If you want to get people back into the game, they've got to be able to. I'm not saying make the golf courses easy. I'm just saying make them fair for the person that's playing.
Right.
Okay, and you can't do it exact, but you can do a lot better job that's being done. I can tell you that. And if Joe Blow or his wife can every now and then get it in the low 80s and hit a green in regulation, changes everything in their mindset. But if they're out there and they're shooting in the hundreds and it's arduous, they're not going to want to do this all the time.
No.
See?
No.
So it deflates everybody. We all have an ego.
Yeah. And let's not even call them the ladies' tees. Let's just call them the forward tees. Right?
Yeah, the forward tee, sure.
Sure. It's like I don't like I'm usually the long driver when I'm playing with my group, but it doesn't mean I'm scoring better than anybody else. I can hit the ball farther, but not with my irons as much. And I think the whole point of play it forward is that, like the pros, you should have an 8 iron or less for your second shot. So
absolutely,
move it up.
Let's just say you're a short hitter. Okay, so a short hitter, you should probably be hitting a drive and maybe a 5-iron rescue club or 6-iron rescue club. But when you can't reach the green in 2 on any par 4, then you're hitting too far back. The tee isn't right for you. You've got to move up. And the golf courses, they talk about it all the time, but no one really scientifically goes on that golf course and measures the golf course out and then charts, okay, this is where Mr. and Mrs. Jones are going to hit the golf ball. And then intelligently put tees down and make those tees not afterthoughts. Make them actually a teeing ground for Mr. and Mrs. Jones. And I promise you, if they would do that, you'd see more people smiling when they came off the golf course instead of frustrating or just feeling like I'm old. I know in my own case, I was a very long hitter of the golf ball, not a big guy, but I always could really clock it. Now that I'm 8-0, which I can't believe, but I am, I can't hit it that far anymore. So, my best drive is 230, 240, sometimes 250.
Wow. That's still pretty good.
I still hit it out there pretty good for an old guy, but still, when I go out and play with my students, I feel like I should put a taffeta dress on or something because they're popping at 50, 60, 70 yards past me with no problem.
Yeah, but you're the age of their great-grandfather.
Exactly. So if I can't compete with that because they're longer with their iron, they're longer with their wood. Come on. So I have to play up. And there's nothing wrong with that, for God's sakes. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Instead of building championship tees to bring more people at your golf course, set your golf course up so people can play it. It's still a challenge, but if you have a good day, you get a good score. But some people, even when they have a good day, they can't get a good score because of the distance factor. It really upsets me, especially for the gals. Honestly, I think they're no one wants to say it, but they're kind of an afterthought when they come to the designing of the golf course or the placing of the tees and so forth. They're just an afterthought, and it's wrong. It really is.
Yeah. I had a thought. No, I lost it. I was going to say something about that.
Well, we were talking about. It's me. I get on tangents.
Oh, we both do. Don't. We both do.
Club.
Oh, no, I don't remember what I was going to say is that how many times I've played with gentlemen who are in their 70s who can't hit the ball more than 150 yards, except they're playing bogey golf because they hit it dead straight and they can putt. So it's not about the big hitters. Just keep it in the fairway and getting it close.
No, there's no question about it. But those people, too, play a lot of golf, and either they're blessed or they practice their short game a lot. But, I mean, the average lady and man don't put that much time into practice. They'll take a lesson here or there. I'm an advocate of not, it isn't so much to play it up, but to set the golf course up to accommodate what your general membership is, not the one guy that clocks it, or not the one guy that can't hit it 100 yards, but that middle range group, and you'd make your golf course, make everybody happier.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the way they set the tour up, it's the opposite of that. It's all predicated on distance.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what, Tony? We have so many more clubs that I'd like to cover about, taking that to the next level, like the sand wedge, your long irons, your hybrids, your fairway drivers or fairway metals or fairway woods, whatever you want to call them, and your driver. So can we do, as we have done many times, can we do part 2 of this for next week's episode?
Sure, I'd love to. You got to put a muzzle on me at times because
no. Instead of the muzzle, I'm just going to let you go longer. We're just going to go on longer. That's all. All right. So that's great. We're going to do part 2 on this and continue this conversation of how you can take your game to the next level, one club at a time, with Tony Manzoni. Tony, thanks so much for your cooperation on this.
It's always my pleasure.